Welcome back, everyone. I'm rather Incoherent, and today I want to talk about the idea of a current format for Arkham Horror. I've always been of the opinion that rotation needs to happen, that it's necessary for the health of the game, but I've never felt the need to speculate about it because it either exists or it doesn't, and I'm going to play with it when it does. Until recently, it has not existed and there's been no word of it existing, but we've gotten some articles recently about current format and rotating cards, and I want to talk about it now that there is actually something to discuss. For those out of the loop who don't know what we're talking about, current format is the idea that only the past so many years of cards are allowed to be played in quote-unquote the standard format, and there'll be a legacy format where everything is allowed. This sounds outlandish to some people, and a lot of people have expressed dismay at it, and I sort of sympathize and understand and agree with that to some degree. The game is fun in no small part because there are so many investigators to choose from, so many campaigns to play, so many iterations of the content to experience, so seeing it heavily trimmed down doesn't feel particularly great, and I sympathize with people who are feeling a bit shit about that. But I come from Hearthstone, I'll be talking about it a lot. Rotations happened in many card games. I assume most card games have survived more than like 10 years. And in Hearthstone, I personally experienced a lot of the things that are currently happening in Arkham that make rotation necessary for the designers. In a competitive game, it is more necessary inherently. However, in a cooperative game, it still exists for all the same reasons as a necessity. And there are two massive reasons that rotation needs to happen. There's a third one that I'm not going to talk about much, but it's very important. It's a business decision. Arkham Horror, whatever you think of it, is a business that needs to make money, and rotation will help them to make money and not stock a bunch of product that isn't going to sell. So that's like the actual real reason this needs to happen. There's really no further talk to be had on it. But there are actually two very important design reasons that rotation needs to happen as well. The first is power creep, and there is no better example of power creep being a problem and ongoing design in the game right now than a recently spoiled card, Incoherent. This is Incoherent. It is a very strong 5 experience seeker card. It's essentially a 3-cost accessory slot that gives you an extra action worth of stuff every turn. You either get a clue, which is what you would do with the action, get a card and a resource, worth maybe a little bit more than an action, or get an action, which you'll use to get a clue. Basically, you put this in play, don't even worry about the science archetype, you're guaranteed to get good shit. I don't view this as a particularly playable card. I don't know why I'd ever build with this. I'm probably going to. I'm going to build a funny science deck with fine tuning and try to get this to go off twice a turn because it just sounds like a good time. But in terms of optimizing my deck, the power level of the game is at such a high place that building with Incoherent is actually not that impressive. And once the power level gets to this high of a point, there are 500 cards, and every card they print is competing against all of them to make it into your 30-card deck. It creates the situation where to make a card playable in your deck, it either has to be an insane combo piece or just power creep the shit out of pre-existing things. Curbing power creep is one of the big reasons for rotation. You don't have to print something better than deduction if in 4 years deduction won't be here. The other side of the coin for why standard rotation is necessary is because of design space. Mandy Thompson, untabooed, absolute menace, one of the most broken combo investigators in the entire game's history. And even though she's been nerfed heavily, the game has still been printed around her constantly. There have been very few, if any, I can't think of it off the top of my head, scry effects released after her. And those that they have released, if there were any, I'm sure there's one that I just can't think of because it's not particularly good, are just not very impressive scry effects in terms of action economy and what it costs to get them into play and get the value out of them. Ever since Mandy Thompson was released, the entire card pool that has come after her has been balanced around her. The exact same thing is true with Tony Morgan and every single weapon available to rogues. In an Eternal format, every card has to be weighed against every card that ever was and every card that ever will be. Each card imposes progressively more restrictions on what you can print in the future without breaking something. And having rotation allows them to get rid of the old design shackles they printed for themselves. They're allowed to experiment with new green weapons because they don't have to worry about what Tony's gonna do with them. So even though it's not a competitive game, players will optimize the fun out of their game. I've been accused of this no shortage of times myself, but it's a natural thing that basically everyone does. If you give me 5 experience, I'm going to spend it on what I perceive as the best 5 experience for the deck archetype that I'm pursuing. Sometimes I'll be spending that on fun, interesting stuff because it's a fun, interesting deck concept. Other times I'll be spending it on fun, interesting stuff because that happens to be the strong stuff. But many other times I'll be banking 1 experience and spending 4 on deduction level 2s because it's the best thing I can do with my experience and I'm trying to have a good time with my friends and we tend to have a better time when we're not losing. So because of all the design reasons, even though it's not a competitive versus game, I think standard rotation is something that any card game needs to eventually see. And I've always felt this way since I played Hearthstone, and I was happy when I heard it was coming out. So while I sympathize with people, especially people who are like worried they won't get to see the old campaigns again, from a investigator discussion viewpoint, I think this is absolutely the right way to go for them to continue playing the game, or rather building the game and diversifying the card pool. Just as a straightforward example, they can release a version of deduction every 4 years with rotation. But if there's no rotation and they release a version of deduction every 4 years, in 12 years, which we're not that far away from in Arkham's total lifespan, then Seekers will be running 8 copies of deduction, which would be horrific. They'd be disgustingly strong, you know, like they are. But that's not the point. Standard rotation is really necessary. I understand and sympathize with the people who feel doom and gloom about it, whether it be because of the perceived value of your collection and all that. However, I think it's good for the game. And I would go so far as to say, I wouldn't even really view your collection as being devalued by the existence of standard. I think a ton of people will go back and play old expansions with the standard format cards. I don't think they're gonna care that technically Forgotten Age doesn't exist. They're like, I wanna go kill Yig, let's go. Pack your guns, we're killing some snakes. And additionally, I think a lot of people are going to enjoy playing Legacy like every 3rd expansion, or rather every 3rd campaign run, because it's just a nice change of pace to go from whatever restrictions you've had, like 2 campaigns of being like, I wish I had X card, I wish I had Y card. And then you get a breath of fresh air by playing the most deranged broken shit that Arkham is slowly becoming in our current Eternal format. I think that Eternal is a real thing and you shouldn't need to worry about it. My biggest concern with the existence of a standard format is the idea that new players outside of tabletop sim might never really get to play the old expansions, but oh well. It's a necessary business decision and I think it's good for the long-term health of the game. A lot of people have a lot of concerns about what standard is going to look like exactly, and I think my official viewpoint on that is give them the benefit of the doubt and wait for them to release clear information on what standard means. It's incredibly easy to be very doom and gloom. Dirty Fighting is my favorite card in the game. It came out in Scarlet Keys. They said it's going to be about 3 years or 3 expansions of content, which means that maybe we start with Scarlet Keys, but one way or another, one more Investigator expansion after Drowned City, Dirty Fighting's out. It's my favorite card in the game. It's enabling all the rogue fighters. But that is relying on a lot of negative assumptions. One, we're assuming that Dirty Fighting's not going to be reintroduced in a core set, because if the core set's rotating out, and it should, by the way, that implies they're probably going to make new core sets. Maybe they're going to make a lot of new Investigator starter sets. Like every other month they have a starter set come out for the entirety of the rest of the game. That'd be cool as shit. One of my bigger concerns is the idea they might do a ton of reprints where you're getting 50% reprints and everything. I would much rather see some things that are 100% reprints that are allowed to make standard keep functioning, like new core sets, than things like that. If things are 20% reprints, I don't care at all. I'm just worried about what the density of reprints is, and I would hope to see some things that are genuinely all reprints. Just here are the cards from the game start to 2022 that are the new core set. I'd be happy with that. But the point is, there are so many ways Dirty Fighting can be reintroduced. So to assume that we are going to play in a standard format without Dirty Fighting, but with investigators that need it, which by the way, the investigators after Dirty Fighting so far don't even care about Dirty Fighting. It's just so easy to be doom and gloom by constructing half-baked pictures of what they might do. There's a million ways they can fuck up standard, and there's also a lot of ways they can do it right, and standard's a necessary thing. So something I've seen a lot and something I want to curb is the amount of people who are genuinely super cynical about what the game might shape up to be post-standard. Because I want to be clear, the game has not so far been printed with the idea of a standard rotation. Even the newest expansion, the one that just got released the one that's about to be released alongside the news about standard coming in the future in early 2026 at the soonest. This expansion clearly wasn't built for it. I mean, think about it. Specialist cards make a ton of sense in a game with 60 investigators. If we cut that down to 20, the specialist cards almost feel kind of random. There's not that many people with traits. And it's not just the specialist cards that make me think, oh, they probably decided to do standard midway through the set. They didn't really decide to do standard when they first started this. I want to talk about Michael McGlynn. and his firearm access. Going back to Edge of the Earth, we aren't supposed to go back this far. There was one firearm, it was the old shotgun. Going back to Scarlet Keys, there was one firearm. It was the hyperphysical shotcaster, which again, we might not be going back this far. We don't know if this will be a part of the standard rotation, but either way, it's not really a gun. Going back to Hemlock, we just got the British Bulldog, nothing else. Michael doesn't want to fight with his foot. In a Michael set, and as I've said, the core set shouldn't be included if you're doing rotation. You don't want an evergreen core set. There needs to be a new core set. But in Michael's set, you got Gatling Gun, Luger, the Tank Gewehre, and it's not here on Arkham DB yet, but the Remingtons. That's it. Michael has to play a firearm deck, and he has basically the guns he was printed with. If you want to extend it to include the original core set, assuming that'll be evergreen, which is an assumption, he gets to add these and it becomes barely functional, but it's still not like an interesting card pull for Michael. So my point with this is, we can assume that like the core set doesn't exist and you're only playing with the last 2 expansions, and he gets Bulldog, Gatling Gun, Luger, Tank Gewehre, and the Remingtons, and Michael's terrible. But the fact that it's so obviously non-functional should be proof that's not what they're going to do, right? There's going to be some sort of core set, some sort of new things getting released to fill out the card pool. Because so far, when they have printed expansions, they have printed them for an eternal format. They have not printed them with the intention of standard. So there might be a rocky transition period, there might not. We don't know what standard's going to look like, and I encourage everyone to try to understand why it's necessary, because very genuinely, both from a business and design perspective, it is necessary for the health of the game. But more importantly, the game right now is so far removed from what standard will look like that without seeing how they intend to like reprint things for a core set and start the standard rotation, we have no fucking idea what it'll look like. We can look at what Michael has available and go, oh shit, standard's gonna be awful. Or we can take that as proof that there are several steps between now and standard that we haven't seen. And we can trust the same people we've been trusting to make a sick game to keep making that sick game. And I would encourage the latter. Being hype is fun, being doom and gloom isn't. So if you have the choice to be a believer or a doubter here, and one of them's fun and one of them isn't, I don't see much point for all the doom and gloom, man. Just assume there's gonna be a core set and Michael's gonna have access to more than 4 guns, right? Me personally, I'm hyped as hell. I've viewed this as necessary for a long time, and once I got over like all the ways it could play out terribly, there's a lot of really cool shit that can happen. Aside from just like them reprinting tabooed cards the way they should be, looking at you, Rex and Milan, they have the capacity to reprint cards in different ways. They can reprint Tommy Muldoon with a different weakness. That'd be sick as hell. There are so many things they can do with the core set, so let's look forward to it and see how it goes. There's just so many people doom and gloom about it, and it genuinely bothers me because it's an inevitability. It's an inevitability that's good for the game. So try to give them the benefit of the doubt and let's see where this goes. I'm looking forward to it a lot. I hope you are too. Oh, right, I'm supposed to do outros for videos. Not sure that this video even needed to exist, but if it does, its outro needs to exist too. I've been rather incoherent. Thank you for your time. If you made it this far, algorithm, buttons, you know the deal. Thank you, Patreon channel members, blah, blah, blah. See you in the next one.